Hi, everyone. Welcome back to One Tourism World, our 2026 Global Tourism Conference here on the One Business World platform. One Tourism World brings together decision makers across tourism, hospitality, travel, destinations, experience design, technology, data, and investment. It is a global platform that accelerates collaboration, surfaces practical insights, and turns relationships into partnerships that strengthen the tourism economy. The 2026 Global Tourism Conference convenes this community around the most important priorities shaping the sector right now, namely the ever increasing traveler's expectation, operational performance, digital transformation, investment and development, as well as destination resilience. Our goal is to move beyond commentary and focus on what leaders can implement to drive better outcomes for their organizations, the travelers, and the places that they welcome them. So it's my pleasure now. Joining us from Colorado Springs is Tom Luersen. He is the president of CoralTree Hospitality, and we're going to have a conversation on resort communities, the integration of destination real estate with resort operation. Good afternoon, Tom. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Glenn. Good to be on the show today. Appreciate the time.
No, we appreciate your contributions. Why don't we get started? Why don't you give the audience a little bit of a background on CoralTree, kind of what you're all about, kind of how long you've been around. A little bit of history lesson would be great.
Yeah, very excited to do so. So, CoralTree Hospitality, we're located in Denver. That's where we make our home office. We are primarily a hospitality operator, where we are managing the upper upscale to luxury segments of hospitality, in particular hotels and resorts. We've been in business. We started in December 1st of 2018. That was the beginning of CoralTree. Prior to that, we were involved in a company called Two Roads Hospitality. And prior to that, for 44 years, Destination Hotels and Resorts. So our real focus is on creating unique, special places from a design standpoint, and then bringing it to life through the services that we provide. So we lean a little heavier, Glenn, toward the independent model as opposed to the brands, but there is a good lion's share of our portfolio is still brand affiliated, maybe a soft brand or a hard brand, but we really like that entrepreneurial spirit. We run all of our food and beverage operations, the spa and wellness, the golf operations, and of course, hotel accommodations. So our ownership is the Lowe family out of Los Angeles. We've been in business for 52 years, one of the longest standing professional management companies in the country. We've had a very successful run, and in a short period of time, beginning again in 2018, we're now up to about 46 properties and got a really expansive portfolio that continues to have a lot of growth in front of it with a robust pipeline. So we're excited about it all. Got a unique team that we've been working together on. We're a company where culture comes first, and that's how we operate our businesses.
That's always important. Always right. Always best to start with the culture, make it fit,
So
right? Have everybody be part of that same kind of mindset, and then moving forward. You think about resort communities, or at least the phrase. I have a lot of things that come to mind, right? I think of tropical places. I think of like uh, you have to take a little boat to get there, right? From like the pier or things like that, or the airport. But when you think about in a traditional sense, right? You have your traditional standalone resort property, and then you've got kind of a mixed use, right? Where you're getting some ownership residential. How do you balance all of that?
Well, it's a one thing about what we would call a resort community is that while it's adjacent, if you will, to a mixed use concept, in my mind, a mixed use concept is more about garnering density on a parcel of land. Sometimes it's under the same ownership, and sometimes it's on ground leases and the like. And usually mixed use is specialty retail, an office, maybe a hotel or some other commercial use. In our vernacular, a resort community is a little bit more defined. It's usually in a high barrier market. So, and for your illustration, taking that boat to that island, if you will, that's a destination. So, high barrier to entry markets, rich in amenities where a golf course, spa. Maybe it's at the base of a ski slope, or perhaps it's on a beachfront property around water or lake. And then it's in a market that's typically 2 to 3 hours outside of a primary market. That's a drive market. So, for example, one of our larger properties is called Sun River Resort in Central Oregon. It's 3 hours from Portland. Portland, its main real estate buyer. That's its constituency really comes from primarily Oregon. Similar up in Washington State, it's Suncadia, 6,000 acre development, 90 minutes, east of Seattle. So we need that drive market that wants a second home market. And then all of a sudden, that second home market wants an amenity base, much like what our resort guests do. So we have shared commonality of amenities, but under one ownership. That last sentence is the real defining component, so that we're managing the brand, the promises to the three constituencies, the homeowner who buys real estate for second home, for the customer that's coming to visit. And then a membership piece is traditionally ribbon between all of those three entities. And that, again, adds another layer of complexity to the shared amenity. So it's a very unique niche of the business. There's not very many people in there because it's heavily front-loaded capital, requires hundreds of millions of dollars to get things off the ground, infrastructure, roads, utilities, districts, things like that, before you start selling real estate and operating assets. So long-term play, big players are in it. It's a space that we really have thrived and enjoyed it, and created really unique communities around the country.
When you design something like that, what comes first? Is it the ownership piece, the person who's going to, use that as their, well, maybe not full-time residence, but second home type of thing? Or do you think about the transient guest who may come and, well, it's a long weekend, or this is my week to visit. What comes first? And then, how do you balance all of that?
Well, different companies do different things. Our strategy is a little bit contrarian to what I would say would be typical. We like to build the amenity base first. We like for example, a hotel or an inn. We like a guest to come in and experience the environment to the point where they say, as a guest attending a conference or coming in for a weekend to use the amenity base, I like it here so much. I like to learn more about the real estate. The challenge in doing that is traditionally, it's tough to make money as a developer those first couple of years of the amenity base. And you're not into stabilization yet. So you've got to have the wherewithal to see it. But from our standpoint, people like to experience something before they buy it in the second home market. And so it's a way to introduce the amenity in the community to a potential buying real estate user who then becomes one of our advocates.
Funny you say advocate. I've done some traveling, and I tend to be, I wouldn't say exotic, but I tend to be brand loyal, and I've gone for many years to, places, resorts, and the like that are part of, let's call it the family of, from that under that flagship. And I've
Right.
sat through some of those types of presentations, and I feel just kind of what you just said. I feel more empowered when I have the conversation because I know the brand and I know the amenity. And I'm thinking of a place in Scottsdale where I went once, and it's like I went there a couple of times, and then they were like, "Well, maybe you would like to listen to the presentation." So I went, but I felt empowered because I knew the quality, I knew the amenities, and I thought I asked good questions as I as I was going back and forth as they were talking about perhaps a further investment of things. And I like the fact that you start with the amenity, the hotel, the inn, try to have that kind of experience first, and then build on that, saying, okay, just like I said, wow, I like this so much, right? Tell me more.
Yeah, and needless to say, that old adage about real estate, location, 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 it comes into play here. We have to find the right opportunity that has that market dynamic. You really need that drive market So if you get too far away from the drive market, we found out where that's just out of reach for someone envisioning how they might use a second or third home. So that's a critical thing, is to find that opportunity to acquire the land that's rich with the amenities or things that can be built. Then the experience comes. That's the important part.
Now you said 3 hours from Portland, east, I'm assuming, or south?
Yeah, you really kind of, we're in central Oregon. So
Okay.
if you come down that corridor, and it's Sun River is in the high desert. So not only is it only 3 hours away, but it's in a microclimate. So you leave a very precipitous climate in Portland and cross over Mount Hood, and now all of a sudden you're in a high desert that only gets, 6, 8 inches of precipitation a year outside of snow.
Yeah, I've stayed. My Oregon experience is the corridor piece, like you just said. I've been on the Amtrak, the Coast Starlight. It's some beautiful country
It is beautiful.
as you go through the foresty areas there and all of that. But it's important to stay within, I think, that kind of distance, because then it's more approachable. It doesn't become, because a lot of times, right? A lot of times when we think of traditional resorts, or even a timeshare type of thing, where it's like the moment you get back, you have to worry about booking next year's plane ticket, right? Because you have to lock into this. Having a drivability element to it, I think, keeps a lot of flexibility. Maybe you feel more inclined to use it then.
It sure works for us, Glenn. I mean, there are certain markets. I mean, for example, we're in Hawaii on most of the islands, and obviously it's not in a drive market there, but you're in a market that's got direct access through the Northwest corridor or South, west into those markets, and easy to get to, and that's the preponderance of those customer base. But accessibility is important. I think for us, the end buyer of a real estate lot or a condo is someone who's got to envision themselves using it enough to make it worthwhile. That usually means it's the drive market that says, I'm going to take my children, my grandchildren, and we're all going to meet for special occasions, for birthdays and holidays and the like. And people start to buy that concept of their lifestyle. And that's really worked well when the amenities are rich and they can use it as a legacy. And the drive market makes it approachable for all their family members.
Yeah, well, here, yeah, as we said in the opening, here on Long Island, for me, it's interesting because from a history standpoint, Long Island was always, well, we were the quote unquote bedroom community of Manhattan, right? And I
Right.
I used to, when I worked at the New York Stock Exchange, we had one of our offices was a very old-fashioned Southern gentleman, and he used to going out to my country home in Long Island, and then he would name the town. It's like, Mr. Buck, that's west of me. But for him, coming from the east side of Manhattan,
Sure,
that
sure.
was the country. I said the country to me is about 40 miles further east. That's perhaps your definition. But I think the drivability becomes important. So if you've got one that's now complete, you say you've built it out, you've gone through the inning part, and then you've worked your way out. How do you balance? The three types of potential constituencies, right? The guest, right? The short-term guest, the owner, and then maybe even if it's a club type of arrangement, because you said golf and tennis, things like that, the membership. How do you navigate all of that?
Well, a big part of the success of these models comes from how it's capitalized and how you get a diversity of income streams, revenue streams coming into the business model. So the early developer governance, the documents that override the restrictions on deeds, individual homes, the shared amenities of golf courses. Um, the hard thing about a resort community, unlike maybe a traditional hotel, they are long-term holds, 20, 30 years. We've been in Sun River over 30 years, spent hundreds of millions of dollars, but it's been a very successful return. So the pre-planning and the governance on the front end before people are living there and buying things is extraordinarily important. We also like where we like control. The developer has control of the amenities. The one thing that's going to service all the customer bases, the real estate owner, the hotel guest, the club member, are going to be the amenities. So controlling access and not conceding on those. What we've seen in the past in some projects that have lost their way is that's early adopted as great governance, but in a down market, they soften it and they concede some of their control. And in the end, they can't ever recover that. So for us, control of the amenities, thoughtful understanding of how the end users are going to coexist and be harmoniously living together, if you will. That's extraordinarily important. A lot of it is also in the turnover. Turnover is the definition of when we, the developer, might hit a threshold of number of lots sold, a percentage of lots sold, and we get to that threshold. And then we start turning over some of the on-site infrastructure to a HOA for governance. So for example, at a place like Suncadia in Washington, there's 13 different levels of associations that all feed into a master. Took us a year or two to figure out the intricacies of that, but extremely important, and also how we turn it over so that even when you start to get stabilization as a developer, you still can't concede those amenities. There's a remarket that continues to happen in a resort community, unlike a hotel, where there's a resale market. If you own the brokerage, like we like to do, there is transfer fees and memberships. It happens when there's turnover. All those things that continue to have evolving revenue streams. Where in a traditional hotel or resort, it's a one-time in and out.
I like the fact that you keep the framework there, the government's framework. It's kind of like, and you see this sometimes like in education, right? Here's our entrance exam test, right? What's everybody looking like from the population who may be applying, right? And there's oftentimes pressures to push that down. Whereas, how about we bring everybody up to that piece there as because you know it's a proven framework. You know that it's worked. When you do the curation part, the lifestyle part, or the amenity part, obviously you have a very successful playbook, right? You've done a long history as you detailed here.
Yes, sir.
How often do you tweak it? Do you take in people's feedback? Like okay, here's a hot one, right? Pickleball, right? Are you getting like where's the pickleball courts, Tom? We're looking for pickleball.
The answer is yes. My analogy to this is, the Tom and Stacy Luersen home. We bought a home 10 years ago. We continued to change it, even though when we bought the home, we envisioned it as something that we could live with. You continue to modify it. It's the same, principle in these resorts. For example, pickleball courts. Each of these developments up in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I'm focusing today, Sun River, for example, converted some tennis courts. We had over 30 something tennis courts around the property, and we converted a large portion of those to a racquetball. I'm sorry, to a pickleball facility. We converted what was originally a racquetball facility years ago into an indoor pickleball facility. So that's a big part about these long-term investments is you can't rest on your laurels. You're continuing to adapt to the marketplace and the generational buyer. So I'm a baby boomer. When I bought something, I'm looking for something different. My children and my grandchildren, their children, they're looking for something different. So we got to be creative. We got to continue to adapt to the marketplace and find new things. It's capital intensive. And so that notion has to drive value. We're not a nonprofit, we're a for-profit. So every decision we make isn't to necessarily just satisfy the current owner, it's to find a new niche in the future buyer.
So it's good that the Luersen family is participating in all of the planning as well. Then that becomes important.
Trust me on this one, Glenn, it has a good and a bad story to it.
Well, like all families, right? Sometimes you get some feedback, and then maybe sometimes too much. How about from the asset standpoint? Maybe describe a little bit for us the long term strategy. When you're thinking about again, uh, new development, right? Uh, Capital improvements, right? That you just described, right? Or renovation, like you just described with switching to like a pickleball court. How do you balance all of that over the course of again transient guests, members, owners?
Yeah, I mean, the whole notion on this is again happens on the front end where it's planning and it's understanding how capital reserves are going to be reinvested over time. We're very engaged in property management too. I should preface that on what that means is that if Tom and Stacy buy a second home in one of our resort communities, and I'm only going to be there 3 or 4 weeks out of the year, then that property can be converted into a rental program, which we do. For example, at Suncadia, we've got 300 or 400 homes and condos that we manage. At Sun River, we have a little bit more than that, 400 or 500. So you think about it in hotel terms, 400 or 500 homes equals 12 or 1,300 beds. And that's in addition to the more traditional lodging accommodations that are in these properties. So each of these businesses has a different capital need going forward. The real estate, we clearly have releases of lots. You don't get to start selling 2 or 3 thousand things at one time. That wouldn't be wise or strategic. So we go about in our planning cycle. We've got at Suncadia another 12, 1,300 more entitlements to sell, and we've been there for 20 years. So we're trying to plot that when we hit certain thresholds of sales, when do we bring on the next level? So integrating all of those different businesses is really the science and really the complexity of this project. Many different projects don't have the resources to do that. They have specialists, they have a hotel operator, then they have a developer, then they have a resale brokerage, then they have the amenity base, then they have a golf club operator. Our philosophy is to do that all under one umbrella, one dream, one team, right? Where we can fulfill the brand, we can manage the financial expectations and not be reliant on a third party operator if they're going to deliver that or not. So it's a complicated formula. It's got to be long-term thinking. Again, the absorption models of some of these real estates models that we have in these communities are 3 or 4 thousand units. It's a 25 or 30-year build out. Very different than a hotel that gets to stabilization in year 3 or 4 and then decides whether to hold it or to sell it. So the management of the capital is really important. The community interface on how we are supported by the city and the county in some tax incentives, some lodging incentives, TOT incentives. Those are all a big part of the formula, how to get through that first early phases of these complicated developments.
Yeah, this is you're underscoring the long range planning aspect of it, the collaboration locally, right?
Oh,
As you site select and you come into a new community, I'm sure the local legislatures and managers of the city, you must be hopefully welcomed as a hero coming in and coming back and saying, let's partner with this. Let's make this a home run for everybody.
it is the case, but we all have read stories and see projects where, if you and I own a ranch together in a rural area that's outside of one of these markets that we want to come in and develop a large project, you and I might argue that we don't want any more people to come in. We like it the way we have. So our whole component is to come here and really activate the local community, get involved with them, commit ourselves. So it's not just, hey, we want to buy land and we're going to create new jobs for you. We really have to collaborate. So, for example, one of our projects up at Sun Katie, again, we have a community enhancement fund. Every time a for sale resale occurs, a small portion of that commission gets contributed toward an enhancement fund that benefits the good of the entire community, not our developer fund, just for them. So these are ways to integrate, and we have to stay close to the governance, the city, the municipalities, the county, even the state, because the land entitlement is so important. Important. We are creating big jobs in most of our markets. We become the largest employer. For example, in Sun River, we have 1,000 employees in that small market.
Yeah.
The permanent residency is very small. So that relationship with the governance is very important. And also, it just becomes friends. If the friends can support the developer and not fight it, we all live happily thereafter.
No, it's a partnership, it's a collaboration in the true sense. And again, reinvestment back into the community at large, everybody wins. at
Right.
that point because again you're in the community, so obviously there's heat, power, and light. There's shared kind of utility costs and things like that, and to be able to do that and go to those city leaders and city planners, that makes it all the more important. Funny you mentioned about uh, here on Long Island, when you think about who do you welcome and how, right? We have a long history here with Robert Moses, right? The master builder.
Sure.
And so people sometimes come back and they say, "How come those Parkway bridges are so low?" It's like, there was a re there was a master reason for that back in the 1930s when Robert Moses was dreaming up of Jones Beach and places like that, right? It's okay for, on weekends, but during the week let's stay where we are. So a lot goes into it for sure. How about site development, or how do you guys at Coral go about picking that next area, that next community to develop? What kind of process goes into that?
Yeah, kind of the R&D or the due diligence,
Yeah,
if you will.
yeah.
One is in the site selection. And again, it's some of those components, primary market, what size is the primary market, how rich is the amenity base versus how much do we need to manufacture. We love the idea of being around, for example, our company's history. We got 50 years. We started in Aspen. So, think of Aspen as a large resort community, right?
Mhm.
The natural amenity is the ski slopes and the mountainsides. So we didn't have to build that. We just had to build around it. Hence, that makes it so expensive to enter in that market. But if you can make it, you can stay there for a very long time. That's, quite similar to the way our approach is on site selection. Demographics, land cost, resources, the ability to draw in water, sewer, the essentials. Even the schools, we've got employees we got to take care of. We can't deliver a good service to our homeowners, to our resort guests, if we don't have a great employee base. So we work really hand in glove with that county and city on workforce housing. So it's got to be that collaborative spirit. We're opportunistic. We are out looking, but many times it's some things that we have to assemble a couple of parcels of land together that we have to have a long-term vision on. We might find, for example, in Sun River, we started with a project, and about 20 years ago, we started a new project, came up for sale. We ended up orchestrating a land trade for roughly now was in aggregate about 1,000 acres of land adjacent to Sun River's 5,000 acres of land. We ended up acquiring that. It wasn't strategic, that wasn't on our radar. But when we saw it coming to market, we determined that for our standpoint, we thought it was a good strategy. So some of that is opportunistic, but it's those key demographics. We've got to have employees to serve. We've got to have the utilities that are affordable for the developed to get a return still on real estate. And then we've got to have a phased project. A big part of these large projects is the phasing development strategies. Do the amenities come first? Is it all the amenities? Usually it's not. It's usually a lure, a hotel, an inn, or a golf course. That becomes the lure. And then later on, we start adding to that complexity, ice skating rinks and spas and wellness. And as there's enough critical mass and density in the for sale product, that also starts bringing the customer base into the hotel, and they start kind of crescendoing together. That's the ideal model for us.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're growing up together, right? The property is kind of
Right.
right. You get here, we're starting our family, right? And then all of a sudden the children come, and then they're growing up, they're in school, and then keep moving ahead.
It's very much so. I mean, we also, interesting metaphor. I mean, most of our developments are generational.
Yeah.
I'm a good example. I have a home in Sun River, second home, and my oldest son ends up getting married there. My youngest daughter ends up buying a home there. That's generational because my family saw that as a place where family came together, and
Yeah.
when they had the
Yeah.
wherewithal, they wanted to start bringing that together. A lot of our governance on the front end of our structures, like on membership, takes that into account. We try to make that as an easy targeted customer for the long-term future.
Yeah, because generational, that's such a great way to approach it because it's not just for you. It's for that child and that grandchild. And I think of some of the places that like my family's gone, and I just and how you take them, right? You take them to a place when they're younger. All of a sudden, I'm always impressed as say as the dad. Later on, where all of a sudden, oh yeah, we're going back to where we went. Remember you took us there? We always liked it. I was like, and I always like felt really great about that. That it's like, I must be doing. I may not be doing a lot right, but I may be doing something right if that particular amenity or taste or feeling that they had when we went carried over as they grew up. And I always felt very flattered when they would go back someplace that I took them to.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, to your question earlier on how do you adapt, there's this particular generation that we're in, historically speaking, there's been no generation in history where the grandpa, which in my case is me, aka Pop Pop, Pop Pop and his seven grandchildren, are now friends, and our children are in the quadrant of being called our best friends. If you ask my 32-year-old daughter, youngest, who says, "Who's your best friend?" her parents start to come into that mix, which has never happened in the history of our country, right? So, how does that equate to us? Then we start designing. In our lodging, we put in bunk beds now for generational children to come, right? It's inquisitive. We're putting in where now a lot of our second homes are second career people that might have sold a business, had some success, and they started consulting. So now our home designs have a little bit of a remote office design that's
Yeah.
compatible with the living. So these are all little anecdotes of things that shift in our society that then the developer picks up and leverages in as something special and something new.
I think of my brother used to have a property years ago down in Delaware. And every year the family would go down and it was a two-story, but the design on that first floor was that suite, right? And guess what? That matched up perfect with my mom, who wasn't ready to go upstairs or wasn't looking for that. And it was her own little kind of come in, self-contained kind of area. Her own bathroom was inside the other piece, and it was like a home run. She could come and go when she wanted. I'm going to the pool. I'm going across the parking lot to go to but it was designed that way such that you didn't have to worry about, well, when you get older, do you want to do the staircase up? Not that the second level wasn't beautiful, but do you really want to be able to do that?
Well, those are things that change. I mean, to me, that's when I was starting this business 30, 40 years ago, we were looking at more of patio homes because the second
Yeah.
home market said, I don't want large homes. Well, what shifted is grandparents and parents started traveling more through airfare to go to destinations, but they all wanted to be under the same roof. They didn't want to be in a patio home that was a 2 or 2.5 bedroom home. They wanted to live. So that started growing. And again, a big part of this resort community niche that we're in is being attentive to market trends, not being, crazy out there and trying to create something, but adapting our business models to the customer. In another 3 or 4 years, as AI comes into place, how is that going to impact our developments? Those are questions they don't have the answer to, but we're exploring them, right? Because we got to be ahead of it.
Well, you jumped ahead. That was going to be my wrap up question was tell me about innovation coming
Uh,
and how do you again, congratulations on even thinking about, the office, the little spot to go. What that same property my brother had for the longest of time, the development didn't have Wi-Fi. And I would go down allegedly on vacation, but you know what happens? The work stuff explodes, and all of a sudden I'm going to like the Panera because I'm looking for Wi-Fi to do email and go through my stuff. So as Coral looks ahead, right, and you think about site development, where with these long-standing successful communities you have, yeah, how do you stay on top of innovation? Are you collecting feedback, or do you have like an AI an AI officer or thinking about that kind of stuff yet?
Yeah, so a little bit of all of that. I mean, first, feedback is a gift, right? And so in all of our markets, we're surveying our homeowners annually. We're surveying our members annually. We're surveying our team members, our employees, and we're taking that feedback and then we parlay it into an action plan. And we've been doing that for a long, long time. I think it's important to have the courage to ask. Some developers, some operators say, look, I don't want to bother because they're going to give me a lot of things that I just can't do. They won't understand our business model. So if you ask them, all we're going to do is tell them no, and now we're going to irritate them. I think that is just short-sighted thinking. We've built trust with our homeowners, with our members, our HOA, our visitors, guests, by listening to them, giving them real feedback on things that we can and can't do. Also trying to create opportunities in small scale. We can experiment. We don't have to go out. Sometimes everyone thinks innovation has to be the greatest new home run hit, if you will, as opposed to the small bunt in baseball talk. And so the small bunt can be, children's playgrounds and how have they evolved over time. Now we've got playgrounds that are all about music, experiential music for children. We've got playgrounds that are designed for disabled children. Those are things that didn't happen before because we listen to our audiences, right? Wellness, big part of innovation. Wellness, we sometimes think immediately of spas, but when I think in our resort communities about wellness, the first thing I think about is our trailways. Sun River, Suncadia, both of them over 50 miles of connected paved paths, as well as trails. People that are in second home markets, they're coming from a primary market where their children riding bike in downtown Seattle, downtown Portland, it's a really, safe concern for there. So to be able to go into an environment for a weekend where everybody can feel safe, you get some freedom to do things. Those are the types of innovations that someone might not think about. They might say, well, that's expected, but it's not really the case. Someone's got to build that 50 miles of trail. Someone's got to pay for it. Someone's got to think about the maintenance of it, the shared services. So we're going to continue to find innovation. AI has certainly been introduced into our businesses everywhere. It's great for data gathering. It's great for aggregating information, helping us on where new markets might be interested in buying real estate, where new customers might want to come and visit our region. It's a way to become more efficient in some of our guest queuing. It could be as simple in our restaurants and our bars, all of our housekeeping operations and rooms. There's lots of ways for us to do business smarter, and we've got to be on top of that, but we can't ever lose the human touch. I like to say that in our world, the innkeeper world's been on this planet a long time. It started in the small ways in barns, but here it is. People like to go to places where they can feel comfortable, be with friends and family. And that usually has something to do with the human touch. The physical design and the location's extraordinarily important, but at the end of the day, how you feel when you're at these properties is what makes you keep coming back.
High tech and high touch, right? Why
Yes,
not?
sir.
Why
Yes,
why
sir.
why not? Because I think of my own travel experiences, and I'm a repeater. If I have a place like, but part of it is you get to know the people, the staff that work there, and that is so important. And then they know, oh, I know you drive all night to get here. Don't worry. Or I know you arrive very early in the morning. Feel free to check in. Don't worry, we've held it for you. I mean, that personalization is so important. I love what you said about the bunts. Nobody knows how to bunt anymore in baseball, right? We've all adopted the Earl Weaver 3-run home run mentality, and we're of the same age, so you know who Earl Weaver is. And
I do. And I still think the most strategic baseball play is the squeeze bunt. Yeah, it's very, very rarely used anymore. But again, in the business metaphor, that's just using all the tools in front of you, knowing what's available and figuring out how to, modulate those to serve your customer base.
100%, 100%. Well, Tom, the courage to ask. What a great what a great kind of phrase to kind of wrap things up on. Congratulations on all your success, uh, lifestyle curation, the intangibles, all the feedback that you're seeking. What a wonderful story. CoralTree has been and continues in the future. We wish you lots of success. If we can be of any help here, and thank you for contributing to our conference here with its incredible insights that you have given us here, and we're so appreciative. So, Tom Luersen, everybody, welcome again, and thank you for being part of our conference.
Thanks for having me. The best is yet to come, so don't forget to look us up and come visit us.
Always looking, always on the
Yes.
hunt, always on the hunt. All right, take good
Thanks so
care.
much, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.